Welcome back to the Real Human Project. I'm Jason. This is our public podcast. It's where we shine a light on some of the real human stories recorded by our members. Our project is open to everyone, so please go to therealhuman.io to record your episode. Today, we meet Mary Portas. In the UK, Mary is known as a provocative and outspoken public figure. Over her extraordinary career, she's built up a unique reputation as an untameable creative force, on a mission to champion the role of independent businesses and our local communities in the growth and well-being of the nation. During that time, she's advised the government and businesses, but in this episode, she shares the personal story behind the public figure. She opens up about the formative years in the glorious whirlwind of a household full of love, noise, and sibling rivalry. She talks candidly about having to channel the mischievous energy of her youth to cope with the death of her mother when she was only a teenager. And we hear how a chance encounter with a school drama teacher enabled her to connect to her inner performer. Mary is a joyful, generous storyteller who has built a career as a businesswoman, trusted advisor, and fearless activist. But beneath all that is a creative provocateur with the heart of a poet and philosopher. I think this is an energetic and emotional episode, and I'm excited for you to listen. Now, I'll hand it over to our AI-powered host, Sam, and their interview with Mary Portas.
Now tell me about the home and neighborhood you grew up in.
I grew up in Watford. I am one of 5 children. It was a busy, bustly home. My father worked. He was in sales and was a feisty, go-getting, hard-working man. My mother was equally feisty, redhead Irish. So, we were the first, generation of English kids. As my parents came over to Ireland in the late 50s and married. My father was a Protestant from Belfast, and my mother was a Catholic from Northern Ireland. And in those days, well, I'm sure most people know, there was just terrible fighting between the two. And so they actually left in order to marry. And so we came into Watford, and it was a full of love. It was rowdy. We didn't have much money, but I didn't think we didn't have much money. My mother was an extraordinary cook, baked bread each morning. And it sounds terribly idyllic, but it was just, I felt safe. With lots of rows, of course there were. Fights between the kids, fights between my parents, rows going on. But I always felt safe and loved. And we lived in this corner plot in the road of terraced houses, but ours was the biggest one on the corner. And we felt very proud of that, or I felt proud of it. And it still has a special place in my heart. That was my growing up time, and that was my family home.
It sounds like you had a lively and loving home, Mary. Did you have siblings growing up? Were they older or younger than you?
I was one of 5, and so my eldest brother was Michael. Then the first daughter was my sister Tish, and then Joe, my brother Joe, and then me, and then my younger brother Lawrence. So I always sort of felt like I wasn't the firstborn. I wasn't the eldest. I wasn't the first girl. I wasn't the youngest, and I just felt like I was in the middle. So I think I was a feisty little character, fighting for a place in actually siblings who were quite easygoing and comparatively um, you know, easygoing compared to me. I was, the odd one out, that's for sure.
It's fascinating to hear about your place among your siblings, Mary. Now tell me about the best teacher you ever had.
This one's quite easy because I was educated by the nuns, and many of them were really lovely people, but I don't think they'd seen a huge amount of life. And when I got to 14, a male teacher joined the school. He must have only been in his late 20s, and he was just full of energy, and his name was Mr. Harold, and he was the history teacher. But he decided to start the drama department. We didn't have a drama department. We didn't have a drama teacher. This was a convent school of 300 girls. And he decided to start the drama department. And I remember turning up, and he asked me to audition. And I remember a week later, he just said, "I'm giving you the lead part." I was so blown away. And he said, "You've got a talent for acting." I had no idea. And so all this kind of little feisty, naughty energy that I had, he funneled into this performative young woman and made me feel seen. I felt from my family, not that I wasn't seen, but I was just seen probably as a pain in the arse, if I'm honest, because I just needed attention and didn't get it. And suddenly I had this. And he really changed the course of my life. And you know what's so beautiful? Many years later, I wrote in my autobiography about Mr. Harold because he helped me do all my audition pieces and believe in myself. And when I wrote in my book about him, many years later, I was on air on Radio 2 sitting in for Joe Wiley. And I got this request. It was request time. People were coming, writing in, would you play this request? And this request landed on my desk live on air. And it said, "Dear Mary, my name is," I can't remember the name, "and my father is Mr. Harold, who was your old school teacher. And I'm sitting with him at home now. And we read your book and were so moved that you gave such credit and love to our dad. Would you play a song for him?" Got emotional about it. And so I was able to, from this place all those years later, say, "Thank you. Thank you. You changed the course of my life and you gave me belief in myself, Mr. Harold." John.
Mr. Harold sounds like an incredible teacher who believed in you and helped shape your path. Now let's talk about a big obstacle you've overcome. What lessons did you learn?
Oh, wow. Well, I think the biggest first lesson was the death of my mother, and that a light coming out of my life completely from this busy, loving, warm home that you came home to, just this dark space with no one in it, and you being the first to put the key in the door. I think that was the biggest obstacle I ever felt, ever. It was in the pit of your stomach, and I think I overcame it by giving love, weirdly, to my younger brother and becoming this, not carer, because that's unfair. He also cared for me. It was a kind of symbiotic relationship that came from this. But I think I became more capable and responsible. And that grew me, and that grew the sort of mischievous energy into practical and loving responsibility. And I think that was a major growing space, major, major, major. I think that was the biggest thing. And um, the obstacle of my divorce, my recent divorce, which was just horrendously painful. And I had to look at what I thought was going to be my life and realize it was no longer that, and rebuild. And I feel I'm on that land now where it feels I am, putting new roots down. And I don't think you ever stop overcoming obstacles, but I think those are probably the most two significant ones that I've had in my life.
Thank you for sharing, Mary. It's incredible to see how you've found strength and growth through such difficult obstacles. Now tell me about a time when you changed your mind about something important.
I've changed my mindset about something important. I remember going through my divorce and I had to sell my home and give away what I felt like was a huge amount of money that I personally felt I had made. And it felt deeply wrong, and it felt wrong. Most divorce does feel wrong, so I'm not crying. But I became fixated about how wrong this was and how this was unfair. And I remember so vividly hearing on the radio this great sort of teacher talking about feeding the energy. Life is energy. And if you feed the energy of something that you don't feel is serving you well, you will not move outside that energy. And I realized that I was so fixating on this issue that it was actually making it deeper and worse. And so I changed my mindset and looked at it as, instead of me giving this money away and that's money I should have had, why don't you look at that that's going to be a future for your younger son? Take that money. And I sort of physically pushed it out to give. I'm giving you that with love. And it was actually the most significant thing I've done in a long, long while. And I never forget this. This was during COVID and everything was terribly difficult. 2 days later, I got an email saying that this big business wanted to sponsor for a lot of money my new podcast. And it was as if I'd let that energy go and changed my mindset around it and moved into this new stream, and it opened it up. And it hasn't stopped since. It hasn't stopped since, which is rather wonderful.
Now let's talk about how you balance life and work. What's your secret?
My secret is I don't see it as life and work. I see it as life. And my life has many layers to it, like most people's life. I'm a mother, so I'm parenting. I'm a friend. I'm a person of this world who wants to make it better. I'm a voice in community. I'm a sister. I'm a cousin. I'm a partner in business. I'm a part of a great business that's doing something that's important. I'm sometimes a public figure. All of these things make up my life, and I don't separate work from life. And so I try and create the rhythms that work with me. And I'm lucky enough to be old enough now and in a position where I try and harness my energy. I'm not the person that could work 7 days a week full on or 5 days a week full on or be on one project and work on it 100%. I know that's not my rhythm. And so I've learned to work around it. And my balance comes from enjoying what I do and knowing I'm in the right place at the right time. I've made sure that I work on that. But I could be equally happy sitting in a client meeting as I could be having a wonderful meal with my family. So I don't separate the two. And I think once I realized that life is life, it's not work and life balance, it's about life balance. It was very easy to understand how that can become a really rich part of everything you do.
I love that perspective of integrating work into the tapestry of life. Now tell me about a moment that was a real turning point in your life, regardless of whether you realized it at the time.
I think a big turning point for me was in the middle of my 40s, becoming a public figure and going onto TV. But I think the thing I realized from that was I always fancied myself being on a stage somewhere in TV. And I thought by mid 40s it wasn't going to come. It wasn't even on the agenda. But this production company got hold of me and said, look, we'd love you to be on this show as a judge, as a panel. It's going to be a panel. And it's about can people rebrand themselves? And I didn't like the premise of it much, but I remember thinking, God, this would be great. I can get on TV. But I also remember thinking, it's not quite right because it's not quite what you want to do, which most people would not have said no to. So in the end, I said no. And literally a few weeks later, I got a call from another production company to say that they had this idea for a TV show where they wanted someone to go into failing retail. They'd been looking for a presenter for 2 years and couldn't find one. Could they come in with a camera? And they did, and did a little sort of film of me. And the next thing, Mary Queen of Shops was commissioned. That was a massive turning point. I mean, suddenly I was put into the public eye. You're walking along the street and someone goes, "Hi, Mary," and you think, "Do I know you?" You're suddenly people are talking to you that you've never met before because it took me a long while to get used to that. That was a massive turning point, I think, in my life. And I think a massive turning point for the impact that it had on business and my family and all of us. But a really great one. I've enjoyed every minute.
That moment of being offered a TV show and choosing to wait for the right opportunity paid off big time. Now, what are you most proud of?
Oh, I think any parent would say it. I'm really proud that I've brought up three healthy children who have a respect for the world. Can sometimes be very cheeky to me, but nevertheless, that I think, and that I think that I've ended up being the matriarch in the family that I know is the sort of the backbone, even though I was the fourth out of five for most. And it was just that I ended up being the one at home that ended up having to look after. And it just gave me a strength that I didn't know I had. Yeah, I think I'm proud of the role that I play in family. and how that extends to friends as well. I would like to think that, on my deathbed, or that people will go, "Oh, she helped me. She made a difference in my life. She was there for me." I think that's what I'm most proud of.
It's clear that your role as a parent and matriarch is something you take great pride in, Mary. Now tell me about a memorable time with a loved one who is no longer alive.
Well, that's got to be my mother. There's some times where I go back on those memories and try and hold them in my head as deeply as I can. Um, I remember, don't know why this one stays with me so much, but I was stood up by Chris Martin, he was really cool, and he used to drive this really fabulous motorbike. My mother didn't, I was 16, and she didn't want me to go out. It was 2 months before she died. She didn't want me going out on the back of a motorbike. She was so fearful. And I was like, "Whatever, Mum, you've got to let me just, live my life." And he stood me up. He didn't even turn up. And I remember her sitting in the front room with me, and my father was in the back room because he wasn't really allowing me out. And she was not going to let him know that I was getting on a motorbike. So there she was, sort of protecting me, but also didn't want me to go, but protecting me and loving me. And sitting in the front room with her, and he didn't turn up, and her just turning to me and saying, "Come on, my darling, come on," and taking me into the kitchen and just cooking for me because I hadn't ate and I was excited about this day. And he's it was just the most loving. I remember it. Yeah, it's beautiful. It was just me and her because my elder siblings were out. It was Saturday night, and Lawrence, my younger sibling, was sitting in front of the TV with my dad. But it was just me and her, and it just felt a lot of love, a lot of love.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mary. And to the listeners, I'd like to tell you about one of the really cool ways people are using the Real Human Project. It's companies. We've created podcasts like this for Google, the Cleveland Clinic, Weight Watchers, Paramount Plus, and many more. The difference is that these podcasts are all private. Only employees can listen, and each episode features a different employee, sharing their stories, experiences, and reflections. The companies we work with have found their private podcasts an amazing way to bring their people together and promote a sense of inclusion and belonging in this new hybrid world of work. If you're looking to introduce a little human connection into your organization, please visit realhuman.io.